In 2007, journalist Larisa Bachanova conducted a journalistic investigation and obtained a number of interviews that were included in the cycle in different formats in defense of Grigory Grabovoi. Pilots, cosmonauts, scientists, lawyers, engineers, doctors testified to the phenomenal abilities of the scientist Grigory Grabovoi about numerous facts of saving people and equipment. These are testimonies about a person who lives next to us, who transmits his knowledge to people in the name of saving the world from possible global catastrophes and for the harmonious, creative, and happy development of each person. These interviews also refute the monstrous lies produced through the mass media, through which the discrediting of academician Grigory Petrovich Grabovoi has been carried out since 2005. These interviews are still relevant today.
Svetlana Komarova. In 1998, she graduated from the Volga Region Academy of Public Administration under the President of the Russian Federation with the diploma in Manager of State and Municipal Administration, specializing in psychological support of managerial activity. Since 2002, she's a candidate of psychological sciences, and the topic of her dissertation work is optimization of relations of subjects of political activity. She has experience of work in the Saratov Regional Duma and in consulting companies in Moscow. Question, Svetlana. What are the reasons for persecuting Grigory Grabovoi in your opinion? In my opinion, the reason is that he has different values and they do not coincide with the values of the people who organized his persecution. He always says that he is interested in people and that he will be engaged in improving everyone's life until those who live the worst life today, both in the tundra, in the taiga, and in other hard-to-reach places, will live good. So, why are the people who oppose him and organize the persecution of Grigory Grabovoi so afraid of him? Why does the pressure come from this group of people? Because everything he says, he always realizes, and it's true. Grigory Grabovoi is a wonderful family man, a successful scientist. He has a lot of implemented discoveries, and he is engaged in self-realization, and around his ideas and values he decided to unite the people who support him. All he did was to register his movement as a party. But they say to him, no, you can't. You must go to jail. There's a conflict of interests with those people who are in control today. In reality, this is their illusion, because they are not in control. And I say this as a specialist. They are all interconnected with each other and they all control each other, and Grigory Grabovoi behaved as an independent person. He did not coordinate his actions with them. Therefore, the danger for them lies in the fact that he is unpredictable for them. If he made a decision, he will still do what he decided. It just becomes dangerous for them, that's all. In fact, it's not like he's hiding information. On the contrary, he's acting very openly and clearly. He says, I'm clairvoyant. I can't lie to people. If I can see how everything is going to be and how to optimize it, how can I not tell them about it? Here, his position is very simple. Question, what can you say about the accusation of Grigory Grabovoi in swindling? If anyone is a swindler in this situation, it is Vorsobin, because all the seminars on the topic of resurrection were always held for free. It was Grigory Grabovoi's order. And this point was fixed in the document which Vorsobin himself signed. And if a person signs a paper himself, and then he says that he came to revive a sketch, and accuses Grabovoi that he allegedly did not revive him, and for some reason did not show him alive, then who deceived whom? After all, there was an obvious forgery on the part of Vorsobin. It's strange why the prosecutor's office institutes proceedings against Grabovoi and not against Vorsobin based on his compliance. According to the contract, 39,100 rubles were paid by Vorsobin for hardware digital processing of information, for participation in the author seminar, which was conducted by Grigory Grabovoi, for the digitized video recording of this lecture, which Vorsobin actually received, and everything that is written in the contract, and Vorsobin received all. And all of his questions about resurrection, if he asked them, were in a personal meeting after the seminar in question. Personal meetings are all free of charge. There's nothing in the contract about them, so the questions asked there are not part of the contract and cannot be regarded as any service. If he had any ulterior motive, that's his problem. No one promised to solve them, not him or anyone else. And if people ask Grigory Grabovoi questions about resurrection in person, that is their right. We could talk about health, about personal problems, about the seminar that everyone attended, about the teaching, and if one really wanted to establish the truth, it wouldn't have been a problem. What activity was, how it was organized, what services were taken for, what and how. The lawyers presented all of this in the case, but the other question is who listens to them today and how. So in fact, we deal with persecution of Grabovoi. They wanted to arrest him and keep him in the pre-trial detention center, and everything was based on lies from the very beginning. They take one information and publish a false one. And when I see that Grigory Grabovoi offers technologies that bring nothing but constructive to life, improve life and other circumstances, and if nothing happens to a person, it is all up to him. And when I see that Grabovoi was arrested and held in custody for more than a year on the statement of a journalist who has already started to recant his words, then this forgery is absolutely obvious to me. I, as many others, went to Kalashnikov's office, where there was an appointment to individual seminars, and personally I made a decision for myself that I would not go to a seminar for a specified sum of money, that it was enough for me to work with the literature. It's enough for me to work with information sources that are available on internet and absolutely free to get the results. And I didn't need a personal meeting with Grigory Grabovoi on such conditions. I was sure I would meet him when I needed, even without money. And so it happened in fact. Thus, money could not be a condition or a restriction for mastering technologies of Grabovoi, for working with them and achieving the desired result. The question is the purpose. What is it for? Why did Vorsobin go to Grabovoi? To compromise and arrest him. And he achieved this, and he is proud of it. And he himself wrote this in the newspaper and admits the forgery. What he wanted, he got. Now, Vorsobin says on a civil suit against him and the Komsomolskaya Pravda that Grabovoi did not promise anything. He did not take money from the mothers. The representative of the KP says that they do not know a single fact of receiving money personally by Grabovoi. That is, they actually confirm that there were no events or corpus delicti in the case of Grabovoi. What then? And on what basis they wrote so fruitfully for 1.5 years? All these articles appear to be a private opinion of the journalist, and there is nothing else behind them. In addition to that, he confirmed in the court that he used the money of the editorial office, so he suffered no damage personally. Moreover, he committed forgery himself. Nobody misled him about the activities of Grigory Grabovoi. He understood perfectly well what he was doing, where and why he was going. Also, he violated by his actions the law on mass media and the law on the operative investigative activities that prohibit journalists to participate in operative investigative measures. Therefore, the prosecutor's office should have initiated a criminal case against Vorsobin himself on the basis of his complaint, which he filed against Grabovoi for forgery. The absence of these actions by the prosecutor's office confirms the interest and the collusion. It's obvious that the subject of our proceedings in this case, in a normal state governed by the rule of law, are the actions of Vorsobin and other unscrupulous mass media, the prosecutor office of Central Administrative District and the city of Moscow, and not the actions of Grabovoi, who works with his patented and scientifically protected technologies, in accordance with the laws of the Russian Federation and the international law. I went to collective seminars that Grigory Grabovoi held, and the fact that the seminars were paid, I took it quite calmly. Excuse me, but people even go to the movies. They also pay money. I bought myself a seat to listen to an intelligent man, so what? I don't see anything in it from which any case, let alone criminal case, could grow. Grigory Grabovoi has a high level of knowledge and experience of how to overcome crisis situations and realize specific tasks of salvation. I want to adopt this experience, and I believe that it's worth much more than any money. As a psychologist, why do all people perceive the same event differently? Svetlana. What a person doesn't have is anchored on that. People are always in a state of neurosis, which they have created. They are embittered. They do not have money all the time. For them, 39,000 is like a red rag for a bar, because many people can't afford anything. They can't take a vacation or buy an extra pair of shoes, and when they are told 39,000, they think it's a fortune. What level should people be brought to? And in general, any consultation with a good specialist, you know how much it costs? The first meeting with a psychotherapist can cost up to 200. And how many more such sessions do people who have neurosis need? But no one is putting this therapist in jail. Question, nevertheless, the side of persecution managed to label him as a fraudster and make the public believe all this due to what? Svetlana. I personally see the use of certain technologies in this. If we consider it at the macro level, at a more global level, then we are talking about management and control, including through the creation of the necessary public opinion. Let me explain in simple terms. There are certain people who hold power. There is an understanding that they need to hold on to this power at all times. This is easiest to do when people are controlled and dependent. If we proceed from the fact that 19% of our capital is in the hands of the 10% of the people, then, in this situation, it's not at all difficult to control the majority, because you have to make them financially dependent. And when people don't have money, they are very dependent and limited in all aspects. If we take Maslow's well-known pyramid of needs in management, which defines the hierarchy of human values, then the first level involves the satisfaction of some initial needs, and only after that can a person think about something else and others. Nevertheless, there are people, exceptions, who may not think about housing, food, about wealth, but just to give them, for example, the opportunity to create. But there are few of them. But for the most part, people still think about how they can feed their families and pay the rent. And our whole country is in such a situation when people think whether they should buy 200 grams of butter or 150. And talk about the fact that the country has no funds to raise social benefits, public sector salaries, benefits, pensions. It's a nonsense. Because the country has money and it's possible to find resources. Another thing is that the people who run the government, they understand that they simply do not benefit from ensuring a decent standard of living for all people, because then they lose control over them. That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, in order to do that, the 10% has to take money out of their pockets. Moreover, this pocket is not really their pocket. It's the money of all the people. Because these 10% are, first of all, the current owners of oil, gas, and other resource companies. And they got this property as a result of privatizations, voucherizations, and other economic reform and transformations. And the main dislike of today's powers towards Grabovoi is in the fact that in the political program of his party, which he wanted to register, he raised the question of the redistribution of these resources. And what did this deprivatization imply? All of us are residents of this country, and in fact, all people who were born and are born on its territory are the owners of its wealth. And if so, then it turns out that the income from these riches should be distributed in equal proportions among the inhabitants of the entire Russian Federation, according to the principle of a joint stock company. That is, since you were born in this territory, then you are already a shareholder by birth, and you have the right to your share of the profit that this territory gives. At the same time, the profits should be distributed in equal shares. And now some of the citizens who gain access to the redistribution of these profits keep most of them for themselves, and the rest are given out for minor expenses, so to speak, although they have no more rights to this property than everyone else. So, what do we have in practice? Do you receive any income from your voucher? If you are a shareholder, how is your interest taken into account? Do you feel it? And 90% of the population doesn't feel it. Only 10% feel it. If you carefully follow who controls all these resource companies, how the revenues are distributed, what the budgetary tax allocations are used for, then you will see what interests those who run the country today have. And to do this, you don't have to have any unusual skills, as they constantly reproach Grabovoi. You just have to trace this chain and their specific actions and statements. And when Grabovoi at the same time says that everyone can be taught clairvoyance, everyone can be taught forecasting and remote control, then the question is, why do they should need people who will know everything? Why do they should need people who will know their motives and understand the essence of the situation? They would rather share their billions with the media to come up with the next Beslandak. They will be found offended, deceived, defamed, and killed by psychics, sectarians, and other impure and dark forces. Question: do you think it's a certain group of people acting according to an agreement? Svetlana: in this case, they were acting in a consolidated way, but this does not mean that they necessarily act according to some kind of agreement. Here is, after all, that there is a notion of group interest. In this case, it's a group of people who have the same interests. They may be aware of this verbally or non-verbally, or they may intuitively understand that this person may interfere with their current plans to achieve some goals. How would I define their common interest? It's, first of all, their attitude toward other people. Specifically, it is the actual use of the population for their own purposes. They are using something that does not belong to them. Why do I think that it is the case? If we are talking about the resource companies, why do they actually own it? They didn't build those oil rigs. They didn't find and dig those wells. And in general, oil or coal or gas is not their property. There is the notion of creating a product. Well, they didn't create this product. They are engaged in its redistribution and exclusively in their interests. They have seized and use it. In short, the one who had time is the one who ate, or the one who didn't have time, he was late. Our society lives according to the laws of the jungle. And it's necessary to understand that these laws are based on the interest of the current government. In this case, I mean the owners of large corporations. That is why I believe that the reforms that are taking place in the country are simply inhuman. Take the reform of the housing and utility sector. When the rent began to rise, let's say, people do not want to consider the situation. Why? 19% of the country's income does not belong to them. And they are actually being told through all these innovations and endless increase of rents and tariffs, we pay you because you have this 10% of the country's income, so use it to cut out. Thus, there is a situation that a person does not have anything, and they are trying to extort more and more from him. On one of the TV channels, I do not remember which one, there was a story on which it was shown that people were evicted from their apartments because they have not paid their debts. A man owed 100,000 rubles, and bailiffs came to him. So he set himself on fire and went out of the window from the 9th floor, to be sure. If we look at this particular case, what is it talking about? Why did the person get into this situation? He doesn't have a job. He can't get a job to pay for all this. Who created this situation? Not only do our authorities put people in such conditions when they are unable to pay the rent, but they also evict them from the apartments. Do you understand? So, back to your question. There are certain techniques for making people feel normal about it. After all, in the end, people can guess where the legs are growing from. There's such a thing as the image of the enemy, and people are always very good at rallying against someone or something. That's the nature of it. If you make an excursion into history in the socialist period, the main enemy was capitalism. There was no one worse than the capitalists. It took people decades to realize that they were being bullshitted. That is, a canalized object is created to which a person exposes all of his negative emotions. A canalized object is a term from psychology. That is, an object to which a channel of negative feelings and emotions is artificially channeled. The feeling of anxiety that a person suppresses in himself every day, experiencing a lot of threats and dangers from the outside world, such as fear for himself, for his children, fear to be fired, fear of price increases, infringement of his interests by any external actions, etc. That is, in fact, any suppressed fears include personal ones. This is, so to speak. In this case, how was this object created? 3 unrelated facts were combined. First one, there is Grigory Grabovoi. He is a Christian believer and he preaches the universal resurrection. Second fact, there was the Beslan tragedy in September 2004. The third fact was that the women from Beslan that came to Grigory Grabovoi in August 2005, let me notice that it was in August 2005, not immediately after the tragedy, as mass media reported, from whose broadcast many of these women learned about Grabovoi for the first time. They took these three facts, combined them, and received the result. Grabovoi came to Beslan and promised to resurrect dead children for money. Money is a must. Because what do people lack all the time? Money. What they are always angry about? The lack of money. So he plays on tragedies, on the promise to return from whence one does not return, and also for money that is fraudulently taken away. And that, as you can see, works without fail. That is how the suppressed negative emotions of much of the population were redirected to Grigory Grabovoi. It's easier for people to blow off steam at what is on display and seems obviously awful than to see the real causes of their own problems and those who are actually causing them. This is a kind of an ostrich position. Or in other words, as they say, a person is afraid to guess who and how seriously infringes on his personal interests, because he knows inwardly that such an understanding would require him to revise his behavior and form of reaction, would require a different life position, and not everyone is ready for that. Besides this, there is the factor of misunderstanding Grabovoi's activity. If a person does not know and do not understand, does not have personal experience of how it is done, the information technology of restoration of Grigory Grabovoi, he quickly concludes that it cannot be because it could never be, which means that all this is deceit. Another thing is that one will have to learn all this anyway and change one's position. The more one removes this knowledge, the more your own deeds will be superimposed, which one will then have to correct by oneself. So, I'm for honesty, first of all, with myself. It's better to look for the true causes of problematic situations and negative emotions than to dump your dissatisfaction with your life on those who, on the contrary, try to improve it. Question. My communication with Vorsobin and other journalists convinced me personally that they really think that they are doing the right thing. They don't allow for the idea that resurrection is possible and that one way or another there is a money element, in this case anyway. What the victims invest their money in, what they pay for, is another matter. What I mean is that the direct investigators, so to speak, if they are participants in this game of which you speak, they do not realize it. Svetlana. But I think they are being used. They may think they are acting on their own, but they are just puppets in the hands of the system. Looking at Vladimir Vorsobin, I understand that he doesn't believe in resurrection, really. But few people believe in anything. We have a constitutional right to freedom of religion, after all. Moreover, it's not a sin to believe in resurrection, given that all Christianity is built on it. Due to the fact that the federal authorities do not show any interest in the quality of life of people, their unspoken position extends to the media, the prosecutor's office and other organs of power and administration. There are so-called laws which act, as they say, by default. By default means the way the authorities treat people. You pay attention to the goal of today's policy documents. After all, these are inanimate economic indicators which have nothing to do with people's lives. If the government sets and achieves a 125 ruble increase in pensions, all the news channels talk about it and regarded as the greatest achievement in caring for people, but we know very well how these 125 rubles correspond to the current prices, and it's worth talking about it as a merit in principle. It would be better to sell this airtime to advertisers and distribute the proceeds to retirees. Count it. It will be more than 125 rubles, I assure you. And since by default there's no interest in or concern for people and human life, these structures are usually staffed by people who fit the mentality of the current government. So, have looked at Vorsobin's articles on the internet and the topics he covers. He's a materialist, and the material component is the touchstone of our society. And when he writes, he conveys these structures. So, these people are on the wave today. Their interests correlate with the interest of the ruling group. This, as I have already said, cannot even be agreed upon. They just coincide, and so the direction of their actions coincides. For example, you wrote a disgusting article about someone. You were not scolded. You did it again. You were not scolded again, which can be regarded as unspoken, by default, approval. And the third time you were already given a bonus and sent on a good trip, and that is to say, publicly or tacitly, but the system and the media policy encourages to do it. And so in principle what difference does it make whether a specific orderer was or whether the power system itself is that orderer, but Vorsobin fell for it, because he essentially agrees with it. In any case, he does not give the impression of a naive boy who does not understand what is going on. The same goes for the prosecutor's office. If the petitions and application of Grabovoi are not considered for months, it means that probably the same tacit principle by default works there. Although, this is my personal opinion, there were specific calls there. I know that there are not 1,000, there are dozens of thousands of applications, petitions from supporters of Grigory Grabovoi, personal and collective, and whatever you want, but they are not considered. Complaints are written to the prosecutor general, to the courts, and again they are not considered. And those who do not consider them, again, they are not scolded. That is, they can conclude that this kind of behavior, attitude to the case, it's acceptable. And since it's acceptable, it means it's in somebody's interest. So this system works to somebody's advantage. So I think that when upper management doesn't scold for direct violation of the law, for not complying with it, for violating the constitutional rights of many people, it can be seen as tacit encouragement of such behavior of lower-level employees. And it's obvious that blaming everything on congestion that they say hands do not reach is stupid, naive. Actually, the state should have protected Grigory Grabovoi, taking into consideration his merits. After all, simply taking into consideration his status of a scientist, having a lot of patents on his inventions and so on. We asked deputies and other people of power, but they sent us run around saying that it's not in their competence. For example, in my letter, I'm not asking them to make a court decision. I'm asking them to apply for a revision of the preventive measure. According to the law, any person can apply, on the basis of the merits of Grigory Grabovoi, and we attached a lot of documents that testify the amount of work that Grigory Grabovoi did for the state, and they can easily check it, but they don't check it. The conclusion: the current government does not need people like Grabovoi. Question: in my opinion, at the heart of everything is a misunderstanding of the situation as a whole. People are limited by the specifics of their activities, beyond which it is always difficult to go. There's a habit of managing, thinking, perceiving in this way. It's always difficult to accept another point of view. That is, it's based on our limitedness and fear of something new, unaccustomed. So, they got used to work this way and that's it. Do you agree? Svetlana. No, what you say may apply to the same for Sobin, Sokolov Mitrich, Judge Ivanova or Petrova or Sidorov, but not to the people in charge. We are talking about directors, not extras. And why are the ideas of Grabovoi at odds with the current governance? I've already told that if you look at any program of economic development, any regional or federal programs, you will see that the purpose of the program is always to increase the income of something, to increase the interest of something, to reduce something, for example, inflation. But you will never see in any program that they are interested in the quality of human life, and that it's set as a goal of this program by its developers. If it's not set as a goal, of course, no mechanisms are introduced to achieve and implement it. And if the first deputy prime minister says that we don't have a rich country, I don't know why he came to work there if he can't even see how rich our country is. The second thing they usually say in government is that we can't help everyone. But excuse me, why did you go to work there? I mean, they don't even have the goal of helping everybody. They don't even have the goal of raising people to another standard of living. They have other goals. Simply put, they are interested in points, goals, seconds, percentage, and so on. They show a semblance of success, which in reality is not, and is simply called bullshit. After all, if any of them wanted to genuinely help people, they would have been helped long ago. Our country has every opportunity for that. There are plenty of them. And then, if they really had the goal to improve the lives and quality of life of every single person, and this goal is not achieved from month to month, from year to year, it's reason to wonder why. The second logical question is whether to the scene. If it was only a question of unprofessionalism, then they would listen to other points of view, or at least allow for the possibility of an alternative. Today, there is no doubt in anyone's mind that one of the main motives behind the persecution of Grigory Grabovoi is political. They do not want a political movement whose goals do not coincide and are not consistent with the current authorities. It's like a dog in a manger, neither for itself nor for the people. That is, power for the sake of power, and their own narrow corporate and personal interests. Question: and where is the guarantee that the next contenders for power can help? Are we once again relying on someone? Svetlana: there's no need to hope, we must act. I think that first people need to understand the situation because they are constantly being held in this semi-beggarly state. They just cannot even begin to understand it and cannot find the time to strength, to think about the more global causes of their problem, not to mention issues of law, economics, and so on. If a person at least begins to actively defend his interests, at least in those issues in which they are being infringed, that's already something. The interests of people in Russia are infringed upon every day and all the time. I know that in many of our companies, especially in the former military-industrial complex, there are sometimes 3 or more supervisory staff, all kinds of bosses, who as a rule have salaries of 4 zeros or higher per engineer. At the same time, the engineers get between 6 and 8,000 rubles and eke out a miserable existence while developing new technologies. It turns out that at the expense of those people, the functionaries get their salaries, although they themselves don't create anything or do any productive work. And people see it all perfectly well, but everyone is silent. Why? And if people at that enterprise should just begin to actively defend their rights, and in another enterprise and in a third one, they should just say and write that their interests are infringed, that a wrong economic policy is being pursued, that prosecutors are being appointed to replace the deposed production director for breaking the law. The question is, what can he do as a manager if he did not do his job honestly before that? What I mean is that many such things are normally accepted by everyone. Everyone knows it, but everyone is playing these games. In fact, people put their hands down and think, just so it doesn't get any worse. And the truth is that it is better not to live at all than to live like this. That is why people leave. Death rate increases because they do not see the meaning in such a life. They do not see a way out of the situation, and Grigory Petrovich just creates meanings for people in some way. And by coping with their problems, people who use his technology no longer think that because someone is depriving them of their legal rights and opportunity, it is a reason to agree with them. I believe that a person should first of all feel like a human being, worthy of a normal life. Then he will not put up with being treated badly. Question. I think that if these ideas were conveyed to people in such an interpretation, then perhaps the political movement of Grigory Grabovoi would have developed in a different scenario. But here a vicious circle is formed. In order to convey them to the people, mass media are needed. And the mass media today are pursuing the exact opposite policy. How can you wake people up? Svetlana, it seems to me that a healthy anger should wake up. It's like the cartoon cat Leopold, who kept saying, "Guys, let's live together." But not many people reacted to him. He went out and drank some Osverin. Perhaps people need to drink a drop, 2 of this medicine too, to realize that people in management are not very concerned about their fate. Question. Don't you think we should start with ourselves? Change yourself first of all, and the situation around you will automatically change. At least this is what psychological school of personal growth, spiritual and religious movements say. Svetlana. When I talk about healthy anger, I'm talking primarily about myself. I already repeat myself. In my opinion, first of all, a person must figure out where he lives, what rights he has in this society, and what he should do with these rights. We were specifically driven into this situation so that we were not interested in anything except a piece of bread. And the current government periodically creates an image that people are angry at and vent their dissatisfaction with their lives. This dissatisfaction has to go somewhere. This is a time-tested technology. which we have already talked about. They create an artificially channeled object on which all people's troubles can be blamed. Such an image of an enemy has been created all the time. If we take a short period of time, then during the NEP, it was the kulaks, since they live better, enemies for others who have nothing at all. During the Cold War, capitalists. In the beginning of perestroika, they were the damned party functionaries. Now, the first enemy of Russia, it turns out, is Berezovsky. Everything in the country is bad because of him. Not those who still remain in the country today and still, but Berezovsky. Then, those who unleashed the war in Iraq, they appear to be the first enemies of Russia. That is, some external enemies are shown. Images are created and they are actively supported by the media, and they distract people from the true sources of their problems. Or very often you hear the question, what do you do? I have to earn money. I have to do this. I have to do that. Those current affairs distract from understanding the reality. I know a lot of successful businessmen who have made their own business and earn money through their own work, produce and create something. But it turns out that if a person does not engage in these macro processes, he is not guaranteed against something happening to his seemingly sustainable business. That's why I think everyone should be interested in quality governance in the country and in quality in terms of values and focus on the lives of the people who govern. There's a phrase, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. If they don't get into these processes, they can create a super successful business, but at any moment the money can simply be withdrawn from the country. How many people were affected during the default? No one is guaranteed against such a thing happening again because there's no morality in power. In my understanding, all people are engaged in political activity every day. They make some volitional decision every day. They make choices. And every such choice leads to a change in external reality. As buyers, every day we invest and contribute to the economy in one direction or another. If we buy books, the demand for books and publishing grows. If we buy beer, we stimulate the market for alcoholic beverages, and so on. People just don't give it much thought, but the reality is that each of us has quite a serious impact on the external situation. And I believe that if people just consciously do it, it will lead to a change in situation in the country as a whole. So, we all always control reality. We just have to do it consciously. We have to be aware of the consequences of our actions and what each of them might lead to. People just need to think at least sometimes. At least sometimes. That's all. Question. Nevertheless, since our childhood, we have been taught that power is bad, that one must work humbly and diligently, not seeking power, that power is the destiny of the bad people. Why do you need power to implement Grabovoy's ideas? Svetlana, here you are talking about the re-election campaign for the State Duma and the presidential campaign. In this case, power is a mechanism for implementing ideas. It's an instrument, not power for the sake of power. Real politics should be aimed at changing the existing situation of most people in the country. It should, in a sense, change power itself, the very notion of it. After all, power in a civil society should provide social mechanisms. In fact, this apparatus is needed to create certain social services for people and to regulate these activities. Instead, people in power are busy organizing their own lives, basically. And at the same time, they do it in such a way that others think that it is how it should be. The problem lies in values and meanings of those people who are in power today. And what they fear most today is that it will become obvious to others who they really are. And that power is bad may be another stereotype imposed, so that good and obedient people do not rush into power. Question: let me like this. Power is good. But then the Drug Party was created and came out of it. The program that it proposed, in particular the law on the prohibition of death and eternal life, they are perceived today simply as a departure from the reality in which we live. People don't even understand what they are talking about. How do you perceive all this? Svetlana: the principle of non-dying is just an expression of a certain qualitative attitude to life in general. After all, what is the principle of non-dying? It's an aspiration to preserve life for all time, to ensure it. This means that everything we do it with high quality. Take innovation in healthcare. They are fighting to prolong life by 5-10 years. And why not fighting to prolong life for eternity? Because in a sense, we are talking about a vector of development. Take it to the max. It's like in business. Do you want to make 100,000? Dream of 1,000,000. You can't go wrong. Other chains of realizations are being built if one sets goals that correspond to the establishment of eternal life. This is both equality of rights regardless of age and the quality of people's relationships. After all, as we have often seen, an ambulance arrives at an 8-year-old person. They see that it's difficult to treat him, and they say, why? After all, he has already lived. And there are many such examples that if we treat people as perpetually living eternal, then many actions in government, including the economy, will be different. Question: let's leave the subject of eternity of life for now. Let's take the law on the prohibition of death. After all, again a ban on something, again a punishment for something. But if a person chooses death, it's his right. Why should he not have the right to it? If he wants to let him die. Svetlana: it's not quite like that. There is a phrase in the program where Grigory says that if a person dies, then it's already a criminal case. If you take any fact of a person's death and consider the reasons why it happened, you will see exactly what I told you about. That the person did not receive social services in time. He did not receive medical care in time. And his problems were not solved in time, and he did not receive a proper education and knowledge about how to avoid them, and not to get ill, and not to die. I mean, why do people live life? By and large, because they don't agree with it as it is now. What is dying of old age? Is to die from the same disease called old age, when certain attenuation processes begin to progress in the body. A person gets tired of struggling with problems artificially created for him. It's one thing when people get into some situations of their own free will, but it's another thing when the system forces them into such situations. I think that if you take all the oppression away from our people, they are all super geniuses and talented, because only a genius crisis manager can survive under those conditions, still hopes for something, not to lose heart, to create something, and so on. This is in the West, but in our country, almost the whole country is like that. Here, every head of the family is a super manager. Where does people energy go? To fight this external aggressive environment. The worst thing is that it's created artificially. This includes some stereotypes that we impose on our children. Parents say, you have to study in order to earn a living, to buy a flat, a car, etc. But he should not study for that. He should study in order to do what he likes, to become successful, to do what leads to the development of the surrounding reality for the benefit of all. And then, after all, the prohibition of death, in fact, already exists in our society. After all, there are criminal penalties for murder. After all, true doctors fight for human life to the last moment. After all, there are emergency services, security services, and so on. There is a prohibition of death in our common understanding of the world and life. Grabovoi simply offers to legalize it and raise it to the level of law. That is to set and designate the goal that we work, not just to save somebody, somewhere, sometimes, but to ensure prohibition of death to everybody, always and everywhere. People ask me, how this prohibition of death can be realized? How can it be prohibited? I say, you should agree that you are all for the prohibition of death. All people are against death, because when a person dies, it's always grief. They show death of people, even strangers on TV, all the same. All the people somehow empathize, sympathize. A funeral is always a tragedy and grief. And if everybody feels compassion and cries over the facts of death, it means that it's not normal when a person dies. It means that it's not natural. It's essentially a matter of formalizing this understanding. Everyone may remember the first time in his or her childhood when she became aware of the existence of death. And everyone will remember that internally he disagreed with it somehow. That is, it's another imposed delusion, which does not exist in understanding of man from birth, because, for example, there are natural needs in children. They do not have to develop to understand the word to eat in order to want to eat. And understanding of that people are mortal is only a social experience of observing external reality, in which it's now happening that people die. But it's unnatural, as always causes negative emotions in the person, and means that the understanding of the person that he supposedly must die is imposed from outside. By whom and when, it's already another question. But God created man to live forever. Question. But you must agree that these ideas will seem outrageous to many people, and to some it's just crazy. And it seriously breaks stereotypes in their perception of reality. Did you take it all at once? Svetlana. It just coincided with what was inside me. When you meet something that resonates with you, you internally accept it all easily, simply, and then it's all passed through personal experience. In general, the question of how to make all people happy has been of interest of me since childhood. I've always wondered why people live poorly. My youth fell at the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, so the so-called time of changes. In fact, it was easy to conclude from what was happening around the country that you could not count on anyone but yourself. Our generation understands that if you don't take care of yourself, no one will take care of you. I watch people around me who can't handle it, and for myself, I've identified two reasons why they live poorly. The first is external control, which prevents people from self-actualization. I watched my parents, who were engineers, who constantly struggled with this terrible bureaucratic system. My mother, for example, was engaged in the development of medical technology related to the preservation of life and health, including diagnostic systems that allow early detection of hidden serious diseases without clinical trials and lengthy procedures in the hospital. This allows you to take preventive measures and cure serious disease through prevention, not leading up to surgery and all sorts of 3 and 4 stages. And so, in order to introduce something into production and actually to save people, she had to overcome so many obstacles that at the end she sometimes gets frustrated, begins to say that why do these developments at all since no one needs this. But after all, even many people do not imagine that such a thing exists, which means that they cannot know if they need it or not. And everything was decided for them by officials who artificially slow down progress. Or worse, they make such controlled decisions through which no developer will promote his already created useful and tested invention. After all, if these inventions were considered not in terms of how many signatures you have to collect, but in terms of the feasibility of implementation, in terms of saving people's lives, then people would simply live longer. And the second thing that, from my point of view, prevents people from being happy is their own internal problems. These are problems that are in their heads. I think people need to talk about some of the processes that are going on with them in order to remove certain blockages like I can't, this will never happen, I'm not worthy of it, etc. That is, these are the inner brakes that keep a man from being happy. Why do we have so many men who drink? They have nowhere to put their energy. They can't fulfill themselves. But here, to a greater extent, we are dealing with imposed problems in people, including I can't, it won't work, I'm not worthy, this is not your level, you will never be able to do it. These are all externally imposed attitudes. There are 15 people in the country who hold all the country's wealth, and that's it. Sit back. Don't poke around in management. You'll get it right away, or accept your share, as the church often urges. But it is foolishness. But it shouldn't be that way. That's why I decided for myself, from my childhood, that I was going to study management and psychology, and I got that education. This is what I always did and do. I think that the direction was already clearly defined from the age of 12. It was only concretized later in the form of a choice of education and types of activity. And this level of responsibility for everything that happens in reality has always been with me. And I always thought about how I can participate in this. And I've always supported and thought that I should promote these people who share my spiritual values, or I share theirs, it doesn't matter. And in that sense, I've always been lucky to work with people that I really respect. I've chosen those jobs and promote those people in power in government who can really help others, not just declare it, but really work at it. And their previous experience shows that what they really do for people and for the improvement of their life. And I deeply respect Grigory Grabovoi. I share his values, his ideology. I had it, but maybe here I came across everything in a more concrete way. I know that, yes, indeed, if you set goals for people, then all processes will be constructed differently. The question is not about a program, but how it's implemented and for what purpose. There are a lot of good programs, but the goals are different for those who implement these programs. And besides, it's always possible to determine by the deeds what a person is really doing. determined by the deeds what a person is really doing, because Grabovoi in his life is only engaged in saving people. He does nothing else in this life. He does everything for the sake of it. This can be seen from all his previous actions, about which there are data and documents. Question. Tell me, Svetlana, are you just happy as a person? Somehow people are obsessed with the ideas of society and personal life in the background. I mean, family life. After all, only a happy person can build a happy society. Do you agree? Svetlana. I agree that first of all, a person should be humanly happy. But happiness is a state, and different people need different things for this state. Personal life cannot be defined by any concept. So, what is a family again? For example, not everyone needs family as a condition of happiness. Love is necessary, but it's not conditioned by external signs, the presence of marriage, for example. Once again, social stereotypes come into play. Statistics, in fact, they don't give any idea of the real state of affairs. It's like the average temperature in the country or the average salary. The average salary in Moscow, for example, now is 200, but the bulk of them have 100 each, and one person has 1,000,000. Or one person at age of 19 got married, had 5 children, and is happy with them. And the other did not marry, all his life doing science, but also happy. And statistics divides it all, and years and children, and the concept of happiness, and talks about averages. After all, what is a family? It's a social system. And you should not care about the family, but about individuality, about the happiness of each person, that is, that each person is happy as he understands it, and not as generally is accepted. And Grigory Petrovich says that personal tasks come first. There are collective and there are personal. So I refer the notion of happiness to personal tasks. And if we will take care of each individual person so that he can get in life what he wants, not what someone decides for him, love is another thing. It cannot be created from that side. It is, after all, man's personal task, how to be the one who loves and is loved. He has to think about it himself, how one can learn to love, and whether one can love at all, right? As I see it, true love is always mutual. If it's not mutual or conditioned by something, then it's not love. It can be affection, passion, a user attitude disguised as intimacy, but it's not love, I'm sure. Love is always mutual. It's just about the fact that marriages are made in heaven, that is, for each person there is their match, their one and only loved one. That is from God. But the heart of things for people in this case is to see their love and not get confused with what is disguised as it. There is a lot of consumerism in personal relationship as well, and the one who has found his love needs to try to keep it. Here, it's a question of social environment which destroys the happiness that has been created. After all, today families quite often break up, which is called life. Because a man, for example, cannot provide a proper level of wealth, and because of this there are tensions, scandals, and they in fact can't. Not everyone is a genius of economic thought, and not everyone has the talent of an entrepreneur. It's just that real labor in any field, not only in trade, should be properly paid, so that a person could do the job he wants to do, rather than leave science for the market, just to feed his family. And who, then, at this time while he's on the market, will be engaged in science. Therefore, I believe that it is impossible to keep statistics on me or on someone else. I can say that I have always had a missionary position. I've always governed myself and my life and placed myself in those situations where I think my presence is necessary at that moment and most effectively. I place myself in elections, for example. I place myself in some managerial situation in which participation can improve reality, and so on. When all this situation with Grigory Grabovoi began, it was very hard. We were terribly pressured in terms of information. Many people in general even had thoughts of suicide, and these are impulse thoughts. As a rule, all thoughts of suicide are impulse thoughts. A person from God has no such tasks. It was hard in every sense. This terrible campaign in the media went on. Relationships with others began to change. With many friends I lost contact, but I think I have not lost friends. And when it all started, all this nonsense, I thought, well, holy crap, can it all be sorted out without me? Maybe it would just sort itself out. I thought and realized that it wouldn't sort itself out and that I wouldn't be able to pull away. I couldn't do that. And that was my choice. Question. They call you the Iron Lady. Why? Svetlana. I didn't know. We can say it's true. I have my internal rules, and there are rules that the situation imposes on me. I prefer the first one. I can also give up some of my desires in the current time, knowing that there is a better one in the future. Being in Moscow, you can arrange your life very well, and there are a lot of opportunities and temptations. Nevertheless, we are dealing with the case of Grigory Grabovoi, his release, and everything connected with it. This is, in a sense, my willful self-restraint. One can open one's own office, for example, and be engaged in restoration of glamorous girls' psyche, and receive large sums of money without doing anything special and earning well. At the same time, actually, that's what psychologists do. They just listen, and sometimes it's enough to listen to a person, but this does not lead to happiness, to a better life in the long run. It only creates the condition of life for the current time and does not guarantee the future. But I value my life very much. I can't waste time on things that don't lead to results. I understand that I can get short-term benefits in the form of some material goods, but if I don't fundamentally change a situation now, it won't guarantee the lives of my children or loved ones, because money, in principle, cannot save. We have to change the system. It's not safe to have children in our country. And this, by the way, is the belief of many women. And then, I always say what I think. If I see that a person has a problem, not telling him about it means not giving him a chance to be saved. Since I am a psychologist and a social technologist, I understand personal relationships, group formation and other systems. And if I see a problem and don't tell, it means I'm allowing the situation to develop in an unnecessary direction. In this case, the situation of the country. I see that the country is developing in the wrong direction. And if I remain silent, for me, it's a betrayal of myself and other people. This is my internal rule by which I live my life. Question. But there is another position. If someone is in a given situation, that's their way, and they need to figure out for themselves why they are there and how to get out of there, if he wants to. Or until he asks for help himself. You offer help, but judging by the reaction of the public, I don't see that it's needed. Svetlana. There's another point. When a person does not know something, For example, a person does not know that gravity exists. Open a window on the seventh floor of a skyscraper and decides to exit through it. What is your reaction? Surely you will take him by the collar, and only then will you explain that, in fact, there is such a force that pulls down and you don't have to go there. And this is what I mean. The choice will always remain with the individual, because now we are talking about a real threat to life. When a person, out of ignorance, out of his weakness, commits acts that can lead him to irreversible consequences. If these were just pranks, then let him have fun until he gains intelligence, experience, and so on. Because now the situation is such that if people with the values and meanings that they have there now go to power, then this is worse than bandits. Even bandits live by the laws. They live by their own, but according to the laws, according to certain agreements. And here, in general, they fight without rules. Question. It follows from our conversation, trust the teaching of Grigory Ravoy and everything will be fine? Svetlana, nothing like that. Question. So, where do you need to start in order to turn dreams into reality? Svetlana, maybe these are trite phrases that one must live according to conscience, one must start with oneself, and it's all true, but people are sometimes put in such conditions. If a person has a family of 5 and they want to eat every day, so first you need to figure out where you really can't do anything and where people are being fooled. Question, well, I saw the truth. The less you know, the better you sleep, they say. So what next? Svetlana, well, that's a rhetorical question. Why do our people tolerate all the situation? Because they actually outlive it. You choose the wrong college, which means you got into the wrong job, which you didn't like, but you got a good salary. You have got real estate, you have got some kind of status quo, but you are not happy in your family. Should you divorce? There are many problems with the children, with the division of property and so on. What does that person think about? Anyway, I'll die soon, tolerate, endure, and so on, and it does not change anything. I sometimes ask a person, how long can you bear it all? He answers, well, as long as I can. And if I tell you that you have to endure forever, he answers, no. Then I say, if you don't want to endure forever, then why endure it even for one day? I mean, what's the truth? That if you don't agree in your situation to live like this forever, then you change it now. The question is how we feel about the value of each day. If a person treats every day as a gift of fate, then he will not live a minute in a way he does not want. Paradoxically, the simple understanding that people will inevitably live forever leads to inevitable need to improve the quality of life now. And there are many such moments. Grigory Petrovich's teachings make you think differently about many things. And everyone, by the way, in his own way, only through personal experience, comes to understand the simplicity and harmony of the teachings, and through it, of life. And Grigory Grabovoi is very realistic. Everything he talks about, he just does it all the time. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, because I always look at things and at a life realistically. Grigory Grabovoi's teachings are very practical teachings. Is there a problem? The question is always posed. How to overcome it? Spirituality for spirituality's sake is not necessary. I believe that we will 100% win. If I didn't think so, I wouldn't get involved in these processes. I've always been a strong believer that something has to change and one person can handle it, but when there is an understanding of everyone, it will definitely happen faster. Question. There is a certain fanaticism and inadequacy around the name of Grigory Grabovoi on the part of some supporters. What do you think about this? Svetlana, I think it's just another way of avoiding the reality. And that's the situation here in general. These same people say that they are supporters of Grabovoi. For example, some Uncle Vasya stands on the street, drunk, not very clean, with black eyes in different places, and he will walk around telling everyone that he's Putin's best friend. Will anyone believe him? I think that Putin himself will find out and he'll keep quiet too. Or maybe he'll agree and say, yes, all my friends, the whole country I'm president of. And this is normal. Why don't we understand this in Grabovoi's situation? Or maybe it is Uncle Vasya is just a setup, creating a certain image. People are like that around him, and he's like that. If I found that out, I wouldn't be surprised, because they do all kinds of things against us. For example, I know supporters of Grabovoi. They are absolutely adequate. They are sane, socially active people, and they are successful in their areas. They are people who worship Grigory Grabovoi and revere him, especially those people whom he saved from death or cured of deadly disease or taught how to do it. But take any good doctor or teacher. Don't we bow before them and honor them for what they do? Then there are people who close the door to and they come in through the window. I had such a case. I helped one person and he, with his endless thanks, was just overwhelming. I could not stand it anymore and I said, I did not do anything special for you. I just gave you an advice and you implemented it yourself. So he was ready to carry me in his arms and what? But all of these achievements he made for himself. He took advice himself, implemented it, and is grateful to me. I think that people should have more confidence in themselves. You can give knowledge, help to make a choice, but in the end, a person realizes everything himself. And the degree of implementation of the same advice depends on him. Not everyone sees this, and not everyone can believe that they have achieved it. They transfer it to an external object, to an helper, to a consultant, to God. Being strong is also a big responsibility. First of all, to oneself personally. And then, why else is Grigory Petrovich so attractive as a person? All his principles he talks about, he implements them in life. If he says that we will help any person, no matter who, then he realizes this. And all the people who came to him, they came for a reason, and he never throws anybody out. And so, how the supporters behave is not the fact that he thought them so. They came with their situations, personal challenges. He explains how to. If they do not perceive, then what can you do with them? Only help or wait until they understand. And who knows, because if some people weren't around him, who knows what would have happened to them at all, and what kind of life they would have led. That, of course, is my opinion. What Grigory Grabovoi thinks about it, it's better to ask him. And I'm always amazed at his patience. He's always explaining to everyone exactly what they are doing wrong, and many, by the way, continue to do so. And when they say why he didn't remove them, because that's what they did to him, he explains it all again. That is, he shows the way. But if a person does not follow it, then it turns out that these already are problems and choice of this person. Because No one will do it for him. But he will explain to this person as long as this person needs it. And I have a lot of confirmation of that. If he says he's helping everyone, he's helping everyone.